Hello, hello. Here we are. I was joking about the all rings of power all the time discussion because there was a joke in the stream like, wait, we're talking rings of power, right? And people are like, oh, wait. Then it actually got serious where we were talking rings of power. Um, but news on that, like Carmen and I sat down for a long podcast with Yoyston from Men of the West and talked about it. So hopefully we'll get that in a few days. It's out in a few days. It was a very long discussion. I forget if we went like it was definitely over 2 hours, but yeah, we really we get into it quite a bit. But it's not bad. I don't know. It's somebody asked like, would you recommend it? And I'm like, well, if you already have Amazon Prime, sure. I wouldn't recommend getting Amazon Prime for it or paying for it, but if there's nothing else on, it's very beautiful. It's got some good performances. Uncle Benjen is in it, and he probably has the best performance. But it's slow and it's boring for a lot of it. But and if you're a lore snob on uh, Lord of the Rings, you'll probably have an aneurysm. But there's otherwise it's fine. It's fine. Nothing huge about it. Preston now will watch all 10 episodes back to back in a 10-hour stream. Um, so I am doing my binge right now, and because I'm starting on my full season review, and it's uh it's funny because I really expected it to be really bad, like the jumps when you don't have the week in between. And on some things it is, but there's actually a lot I'm catching where I'm like, huh, like that was actually a theme all the way through. And I think that's in part because Ryan Condal is the writer for the first 2.5 episodes, and then he's the writer at the end. And so I think Ryan Condal made a very concerted effort to rewatch his own pilot and go back and include those elements again. There's a lot of weird things, and I'll get into it. I don't want to spoil too much for the full season review, but there's some odd stuff. Like for example, I'm not sure of the statement being made, but in the first episode, Emma Aaron mentions that Rhaenyra thinks that she's the baby is going to be named Visenya, and then in the last episode, obviously, like she does, like, and of course, the prophecy that Viserys is talking about is like, oh my gosh, I saw this vision of my child on the throne, and Emma Aaron's like, oh, the baby's gonna be, Rhaenyra thinks it's gonna be Visenya, and of course, in the last episode, she has Visenya, and immediately after the Visenya's birth and death, she's crowned. Of course, she doesn't mention the name Visenya, but we kind of all know it's Visenya as fans. And so it's like he's clearly making a connection between that first and last episode. I'm not exactly sure what that message is. Like it's a little shaky. Like, is it supposed to be fitting the prophecy? Is it supposed to be fitting the prophecy in a weird way? Is he saying that Emma Aaron is actually the dreamer, and not Viserys the whole time? And there's some weird, interesting things like that where I'm like, clearly he was thinking about something and he's trying to make a parallel to it, but I'm just not entirely sure what it is, So there's definitely things that Ryan Condal was thinking about, like as an entire season arc. But I think there's communication issues where passing it on to other writers, a lot of that stuff is lost. And so kind of in the middle, a lot of the themes get chopped up. I also realized that there's a big disconnect between what the actors and the directors and Ryan Condal and the writers kind of all want. And in some ways, it adds extra layers to the show because you have multiple interpretations. But in other ways, you kind of realize that they're not all on the same page of what they're trying to communicate. For example, like Daemon in the brothel, like why he ran away from Rhaenyra, depending on who you ask, whether it's a writer or director, they give you a different answer on Daemon's motivation. Another one is actually like the lesbian undertones of Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship, which was not a writer showrunner decision, but the actors put that in. But then that wasn't communicated to Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke. So you don't see it between Olivia Cooke and Emma Darcy, but it's definitely there between, with Miley Alcock and I've got Alicent actress. It's Emily Carey. And of course, Emily Carey is gay, so she was thinking about these things and discussed it with Millie Alcock and stuff like that. So, anyway, that's all coming out soon. Working on it. Mance Raider, by changing the letters spells, da mercenary, Daenerys, Sir Dane, A plus L equals D, Callan Tully spells lately, coincidence. A lot of people go into these things about names and what the names mean and whether or not George was thinking about these things. A few of them are like Hodor. Like, is Hodor named for the sort of, element of Norse mythology and stuff like that, or is it a coincidence? Because Hodor doesn't resemble anything in Norse mythology at all. His story doesn't resemble anything. Is it just some sort of coincidence? And, probably. Like, there's ones like Theon, where I'm like, well, Theon means godly. And and they kind of repeat over and over again that only a godly man can sit the sea stone chair. And I'm like, okay, I think that one probably George thought about, and maybe he thought about Bran meaning Raven or something like that. But for the most part, I don't know if too many of these names mean anything. He's kind of just he throws a lot of homages to his previous work and like other stuff out there. But I don't know if it means very much. Like, even like Lyanna being named for Lyanna from a song for Leah, like, doesn't really mean much. Or Rob being named for Rob from a song for Leah doesn't really mean much. You don't learn anything about those characters by reading that story. You learn a lot about the themes of Ice and Fire from reading that story, but you don't learn anything about those characters specifically. So I'm not too much into the name stuff. I know this was like a half kind of joke question, but I do get a lot of questions about like, what does this name mean, and somebody pulling out mythology and George thinking about that stuff. I don't necessarily think he thought about it too much. Thoughts on the focus on Targ births, but no one else. It sort of lowers its themes on feminism since it focuses on a specific group of noble women. Yeah, so I'm going to discuss this a lot actually in the full season review. But there's the show begins with themes of obviously patriarchy and destiny, which are two odd things to pair together, because like the show begins and you're obviously at the Council of 101 and the theme there is patriarchy, and we're hit over the head with patriarchy. Like, anyone that watches the show and is like, I don't see any like like messages about sexism and patriarchy, like I would like question like what, like you need to go to the doctor, because it's like so overwhelming, right? That this show is about sexism and patriarchy and the ills of the system. But then it's coupled with destiny which, you know, and connecting it to Daenerys. This is a story 171 years before Daenerys, and we're talking about the prince that was promised, and the dagger, and Daenerys, and maybe Arya, you know, and where that leads. But both of those two things kind of are like diminish human agency. Like you're either, you know, forced in this system of patriarchy where you don't have agency and it's a horrible system, or you're stuck to this like message of destiny, which by the way was handed to Rhaenyra by her dad. um and so what, like all this discussion of like birthrights and everything, like we know like the whole system is horrible. We keep seeing that the system is horrible. All of the characters are miserable, and war keeps happening because the system's horrible. The Game of Thrones is about that same thing. Daenerys didn't break the wheel. Even putting Bran on the throne at the end is kind of shitty, like shitty ending. It's weird that they're coupling their themes with season 8. I mean, we'll see. I mean, you know, the show's not over. We'll see where it goes. But yes, like focusing on the importance of birthright diminishes from the fact that like the whole problem is birthright. Like the whole problem is like that we're choosing, you know, heirs based on like birthright. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. You know, we'll see what Brian Condell does in the end, but it's human agency and actually like protecting people and like the small folk who are just, I mean, not thought of as at all as like Rhaenys like just killed a whole bunch, and you know, or Rhaenyra like ordered the murder of some random guard, you know. But thoughts on Linda and Sue the Fury? I have not heard about this. Though, oh, I see. Okay. Sue the Fury. Um, I don't know about specifically her fights with Sue the Fury, but I will say that Linda gets in a lot of fights. On Twitter. She's tried to tone it down over the years, but she really can't resist. She says some very risque things that she's smart enough to know she shouldn't be saying. I think the God, like, I don't know. Do you guys know about the chocolate balls like situation? The chocolate balls. I don't even want to like mention the Swedish name, but like there are some Swedish chocolate balls. She's Swedish, and their name sounds like, you know, the N word, and it's and for that reason, Swedish people themselves now don't call them this anymore because they understand that the name kind of sounds like this. And so you can look at that like history of those chocolate balls like the same, like in a couple ways. You can say like, well, maybe these chocolate balls were named after the bad word for black people and we shouldn't use it. We don't know. Or maybe it's just the name sounds similar and everyone's too sensitive. What, you know, those are probably the two ways to look at history with these chocolate balls and the Swedes. And you know, she mentioned the chocolate balls like and brought up their name, you know, probably in the sense that she was trying to point out that like we're making something out of nothing. But um she knew that it was risque. She knew that like she's married to an American. Like she should know these sorts of things. Like just stop playing it like you're trying to be racy and stuff like that. And like um she needs, like, I don't know anything about this one with Sue the Fury. Like someone might explain it to me, but like Linda gets herself in trouble a lot, and she needs to calm down. Like she needs to calm down. But regarding Blood and Cheese, assuming Larys is really cheese, what could happen to set him off to actually kill a child? Will Allison stand up to him? That's a good question. I mean, I think right now with the end of the season, it could be either way with Blood and Cheese. Some people say, well, look, at the end of the season ended with Larys burning down the White Worm's house. She's probably, maybe she'll retaliate and do the Blood and Cheese incident, and um and I mean the source material blames her, right? So like, they could just give it to her character that she did it. Though it's not very much in the White Worm's character at this point, right? Like killing some innocent kids doesn't sound like the White Worm. At least not the White Worm that we've established in this, right? The White Worm, the only thing that she's cared about so far, besides like being free from like the control of others, is children, right? Protecting these innocent children. Oh, so her going around and like killing some innocent kids doesn't sound like the White Worm's character. Now, House of the Dragon doesn't necessarily have that consistent of characters, so maybe they're going to give it to White Worm, to Mysaria. But I think if Larys is cheese, like I don't think anything needs to set him off. Like he's ready to kill people for whatever weird purpose he has. I mean, he killed his own family with no one really like like telling him to do that. Um, but I think it's like I think it's just if he does it, it's because he's more on the dragons must die, like these Targaryens must die kind of thing. I don't, but maybe Alicent will do something weird. Maybe it will be something small like Alicent spurning him. Thoughts on the 3/4 comments? You once estimated 2/3 done, but wins is apparently 1,500 manuscript pages. Nothing that long will be published. I'm expecting it will be truncated like Dance, thus wins soon. No, I don't think. So my thoughts on this. So I estimated 2/3. He says 3/4. You know that George is going to exaggerate a little bit. You know he's going to rewrite stuff. So he's not really 3/4, right? He even admitted that he's going to rewrite stuff. The last chapters of Dance took the longest. Like he was very close to being finished with Dance for a long time. Those final pages of finishing and cramming things together were a real problem. Now, granted, it had to do with the Myronese knot as well. So like there was, which Myronese knot is more near the end of the book and stuff like that. But ending things is always harder. Beginning things and ending things and writing is always harder. So I don't think it's going to be anything like that. Also, the way he writes is he writes one point of view from the beginning all the way to the end, kind of. Or he writes and then he gets stuck with some writer's block, and then he'll maybe start another character and kind of write and go on. And then he chops up his very long chapter. That's generally how he writes. Like he doesn't, for the most part, do it like the way we're doing the fanfic of like one chapter at a time. Like he thinks about the whole arc of the story. So he's 3/4 done, but it's more like he's finished these characters and he needs to go back to the beginning on some people. And so it's not like they can do like Wins Part 1 and stuff like that. Now, I do think that Wins will be truncated, but he will need to get to a point where he's finished, and then they'll cut it, and then he'd be like, oh, well, I'm 300 pages in on Dream. I think it's kind of like that. The other thing is we know he has Bran still to go, and Bran is going to be by far the hardest chapters to write. I mean, just think about that, like the time travel and trying to figure out his time travel situation. Like it's going to be really complicated. And Bran is also the theme of the whole story. So we're talking like the hardest material. So I don't think Wins will come anytime soon. Like I think it's if it comes, it's like minimum 2 years away. Like minimum. I don't think and maximum never. I mean, like it's not going to be anytime soon. But just for those reasons, like exaggeration, rewriting, endings being harder, Bran is still on the horizon. It's just tough. Um, what do you think of Andor becoming more Star Warsy? Enjoying the 3 episode arcs. It's the opposite of House of the Dragon. Andor, I love. I was actually comparing it to The Wire. Um, if you know where and it reminds me of The Wire in the sense that like when the episode ends, you're kind of like, wait, that's the end of the episode. I want to get into the next one. It's kind of a slow burn. Um, I do like the whole 3 episodes, 3 episodes, 3 episodes thing. Uh, I thought the last switch from him going to prison was really like weird and confusing. Like by coincidence, he's like. At first, I was like, did the other guy like mess with the computers to put him in prison? And I thought that was the reason. I was like, no, he just got like randomly picked up and sent to prison. I thought that the prison is a really cool plot. I think it's like I'm so into watching it. But I was like, I did think like that was a really quick transition. Like by coincidence, he's like thrown in prison randomly for no reason. And maybe it's not going to be for no reason in the end. But I liked the heist. I liked I think Andor is the. I mean, not to pump it up too much, but Andor is the best Star Wars property since Empire Strikes Back. Like it is really really good show. Uh, so surprising, so well acted. Has nothing to do with Star Wars. I mean, the last episodes are they feeling more like Star Wars a little bit in that, but not so much like it's so much about the show is about bureaucracy, which is kind of like The Wire as well. Like there's so much about the Empire's bureaucracy, which is fascinating stuff. Like how the system works and these imperial bureaucrats like doing things, and then seeing like factories and prisons and the day-to-day life of how the empire would actually work and function, and how the rebellion would actually work and function, like funding and politicians. And it is it's the Star Wars Wire. Like that's what it is. With some action here and there. I can't recommend it enough. It's really freaking good. I can't um but yeah, here, back on this. Why can't they split Winds of Winter into part 1 and 2? Because he doesn't write that way. I mean, he it would be easier to split Winds of Winter in the same way that he split Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, which I think would be a fun split. I kind of liked, in retrospect, like the different characters in different books kind of thing, but I think I think that would be a more realistic split than part 1, part 2. Nice song in the last watch video. Thank you, thank you. That just kind of came together. It just kind of came to me. I was like, yeah, let's put together this little song. Wondering how they're going to turn the battle over the God's Eye and Blood and Cheese into tragic accidents where nobody is at fault. I think Blood and Cheese will definitely be somebody's fault. Um, Now, the Battle of the God's Eye. eh, it is too bad that, and I think it's really important to build up a rivalry between Aemond and Daemon. Something that George R. Martin never did. So I think that's really important, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's going to just be a freaking episode. I think first of all, it's going to be like an episode long battle. Okay, that is just going to be like them fighting in the air for the entire episode. I that's what I predict. A full episode is the battle over the God's Eye. The episode will be called like God's Eye, and then it'll be like the entire episode will be that battle. Um, but somehow like they're they won't be able to establish the rivalries. I just don't see it unless like Aemon burning the Riverlands like gets Daemon something. We have Daemon somehow in the Riverlands when the burning happens, and Daemon getting away or something. They add something like that. There's a lot of face-offs that need to happen, but I don't know. They'll have to write them in. Like, you feel like Alicent and Rhaenyra need to talk again, you know, and Daemon and Aemond need to have some build up. But you know, when is there going to be opportunity? But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, like last episode, we needed, you know, this was Ryan Condal's like last like writing, and he needed to bring back the friendship. He needed to bring back the friendship, but he couldn't bring Alicent to Dragonstone, so he had Otto bring that page referencing the first episode. Now, we never really thought of that page being a symbol of their friendship. The tree is the symbol of their friendship, right? But you know, he's got that page, and he, you know, we're trying to feel, you know, Alicent Rhaenyra friendship being brought in as a theme again, and you know, we're gonna have to somehow have more of that but the characters, you know, rarely cross paths again. So we'll see how it works. I do think there are some weird little choices that they made where I would have swapped in different characters. Like there's a scene in episode 7 where they're at the funeral where Aemond goes up to Jace and is about to apologize and is about to have a connection with Jace, and then kind of doesn't, and then walks away. And you're like, well, why is it important that he did that with Jace? Like, it would have been better for him to try to do it with Luke, really, considering that they're the two characters that have this story, Luke and Aemond. But he does it with Jace, and so like, why didn't they just swap that around? You know, I don't know. But there's a lot of little things like that where I'm like, or rewatching the beginning, I'm like, okay, I understand that it's in the book that like that Kristen Cole and Daemon have this like rivalry at tournaments, but going forward, like Kristen Cole and Daemon have nothing. Like there's nothing between them. Like there's no Otto and Daemon. I understand, like, you know, but you know, Daemon and Aemond, you know, but why put this time into like establishing a Kristen Cole like Daemon rivalry in the beginning if it's not going to go anywhere, you know? I mean, for Rhaenyra's sake, that like Rhaenyra gets all hot that like Kristen Cole defeats Daemon, you know, maybe. I don't know. It's funny how the casual viewers think Viserys was a good king and his advisors stole the kingdom right from under his nose without him ever realizing. I do think that as much as Paddy Constantine's like performance is incredible, and when you think about how powerful episode 8's like Viserys walk was, in fact, it might even be like my favorite scene of the season 1. Though I really like Vaemon's speech and everything. Like, you know, it's an epic scene, but at the same time, it kind of goes against the entire theme of the show. Like, if the theme of the show is about patriarchy, right? And it's about, and Rhaenyra is this character that the showrunners think is punk rock, right? Like, the showrunners divided the characters into punk rock and Trumper, right? They specifically said this. Now, to an American who's in his 40s, like, this makes sense to me completely. And to like Ryan Condal and Michael Sapochnik, they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Like when they say like Rhaenyra's punk rock and Alicent's Trumper, like I understand. When they told that to the actresses and actors who are all like younger and British, they're like, I don't understand what that means. And it's like, well, you know, maybe you just have to be of a certain like age and to like understand. Like, not that the Brits didn't have punk and things like this, but in an American mindset of like Gen X and things like this, like it just makes sense. Like you're rebellious, but you're supposed to be caring about people and like being socialist and like but at the same time not doing what the man wants, like being an individual, like it's DIY, but at the same time caring about other people at the same time, like punk rock. And then Trumper, like, well, it's, she's going to be religious and she's going to be a hypocrite and she's going to be holier than thou. And like, it all makes sense to like an American Gen Xer. But like, I can, like, the actors were all very confused by this. But, clearly this is the theme that like Rhaenyra is trying her best to live a happy life and have agency, you know, under the yoke of this patriarchal system. Like this is the plot. The fact that she had to ask daddy for help and have Viserys come in and like save her, under the guise that like the prophecy, her destiny is like, to be the heir, is a little weird thematically. Even though like when I'm watching season like episode 8, I'm like, man, this is fucking rocking scene. Like an old man walking down across a throne room is like more exciting than all of this action. But I do recognize that thematically it's kind of a disaster, even though it's like my favorite fucking scene. But this is a big problem with Viserys. Like Viserys is a tragic character. I mean, he's not dissimilar to Ned in that he's trying to do the right thing, but at every step he is reinforcing the horrible system that that exists. I mean, naming Rhaenyra is a step in the right direction, but at the same time, like he doesn't do all of these other things that could have helped. But yeah, I mean, Viserys, I think is supposed to be. I think he's supposed to be a bad king, and then I think Paddy Constantine went and made him like the most relatable, likable guy. I think that's what kind of happened, is that there was a disconnect between the writers and the actors. Anyway, do you think the show will change Aegon III to marry Jaehaera for them to both survive into adulthood? I find that a far better ending than Fire and Bloods. I see what you're saying. Because if there is another theme about Fire and Blood, is we're talking about the patriarchy, and we're talking about the cycle of that no matter what, like we adults, like on to children, like continue this cycle. We do our best, but like we just keep perpetuating it. And even though, and this is one of the cool things that the show did, is like that like Alicent and Rhaenyra reconcile. I think they needed to do better work on the reconciliation, but I like the fact that they reconcile, but it's already too late because the two characters have already passed the problems onto their children. And even though Alicent and Rhaenyra individually beat the system and came to terms, like it was, they already poisoned their well. And so the idea is that like eventually though, would the children like learn the mistakes and have a happy ending and marry each other and stuff like that. And so I see that being a kind of ending that would reconcile that in the end, like the son of Rhaenyra and the grandchild of Alicent would come together and sit the throne. Now, Aegon III is betrothed to Jaehaera at one point. He just never. Jaehaera just dies, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna jump to my. Jaehaera just ends up dying before they can have any kids. So it could be that they end with the marriage, and that's the end of the series, and they're like happily ever after. Well, except for Jaehaera's gonna die and Aegon's gonna remarry. I mean, I could see them doing that, but But yeah, you say survive into adulthood, but they might just end it with the marriage, and but they're like happily ever after, and then you have to only the fans know that it's not so happily ever after. Um, the show has this idea that Alicent was the same amount of power as a Targ woman who has dragons. This irks me because that's just not true. Alicent has to play the system. Targs don't. Yet Alicent is put down. I mean, you are right that one thing that's taken away um, in the so one difference between Fire and Blood and um, House of the Dragon, and this is weird considering House of the Dragon is spending so much time beating in the fact that like this system is horrible and abusive to women, but at the same time they've scaled back the agency of both Rhaenyra and Alicent. In Fire and Blood, the book, Alicent and Rhaenyra are just doing their fucking shit because they're both rock stars, like with agency, who like are in this feud and they're taking action. Meanwhile, like in the show, Rhaenyra is, you know, controlled a lot by her father. Alicent is controlled a lot by her father, and their houses and things like that. And they're kind of like bound into their actions, forced into their actions. Alicent just because she wants to be a good mother and she's bound by her genes to do what she does. Rhaenyra bound by this prophecy that she can't get out of. Neither of them really doing what they want to do. They're all forced to do what they want to. They're all forced to do what they do. So I will say that like George had intended the characters to have more agency, and the show, in its striving to make women victims, which women are victims in this system, but they in their pursuit of making them victims, they've taken away the agency of the characters. So it does irk me a bit that like they could have shown Alicent being savvy and clever and earning her power rather than just having it. Like, you know, we go forward in the 10-year time jump and she just has the power. We're not sure how she got the power. We kind of end episode 5 with, well, she's getting to know Laurie Strong. Perhaps this relationship is going to do something. Perhaps she's going to use information. In fact, if you watch episode 1, they actually make Alicent and Rhaenyra both into gossips. And they both know all of the things going around at court, and they know the Game of Thrones. There's some setup in the pilot that they are clever, savvy characters working the Game of Thrones. But then and they're just kind of like handed their situations. We never see them earn it or take action or things like that, which is too bad. Because, you know, Alicent is just like, how did Alicent get to the point where she's running the freaking kingdom? We don't know. Like, we don't know. It's off screen. We're not sure if it's handed to her. We're not sure if she cleverly earns it. She's just there. You know, like Rhaenyra's got that pack of dudes at the end with Daemon on her island. How'd you get that pack of dudes? Like, are they all just like dudes that like swore oaths and that's it? So her power is just handed to her? Like, how did she earn it? How was she being savvy? It's yeah, it is a little too bad. It is a little too bad. Writers write excellent scenes but often forget the narrative logic. I do think that this is the case, and I think it's the problem of like, yeah, like there being a disconnect between the directors and the actors and the showrunners and the writers. Like, had Ryan Condal had a hand in writing every single episode, or more of a hand in writing every single episode, I think it would have been more consistent. Because I do sense, like watching his episodes, I do get a sense that he cares about like bringing the stuff in and making stuff consistent. In Game of Thrones, we had who was the writer that was so fucking into lore? And his episodes were just so markedly, like, just so different than the other. Brian Cogman. Brian Cogman's episodes of Game of Thrones were just so incredibly different from everybody else. Like, he was so focused on like reading everybody else's scripts and being like, fuck, they established this, they established this. I need to reference this. I need to lampshade this. I need to bring in this from a previous episode. Like, his episodes are crazy about like having the tentacles and bringing it together. He was so focused on that. And I do think in the later seasons of Game of Thrones, he was the only one keeping it together. I can't like, you know, but there's only so much the guy can do. But like, and I just do think that had the writers not been so focused on shock moments did better sharing and communicating, I think things would have been perfect. But yeah. Let's see. Unwin Peak isn't that bad. Murdering Jaehaera was good for the realm. Secret Siege overstep. But he wasn't there for the fears of the Rogara taking over. Ooh, getting into some big political shenanigans. House Rogara is of course the house that Viserys II. So Rhaenyra has, you know, two sons by Daemon, who eventually, spoilers, at the very end of the Dance of the Dragons, like, they end up sitting the throne. So Aegon III is the ruler, but Viserys II is hand, and he's really the true leader. And even though Viserys II is only king for like 6 months, he's hand for a lot longer. So in a sense, the Viserys control is how the Viserys II control is how kind of everything goes. And Viserys II is married to a Lyseni house called House Rogare or Rogare, I don't know. And so there's a lot of you know, conspiracy questions with regards to that. But you know, was this all for the best? Who knows? It all depends what you want. Do you want dragons to return or not? You know, the eventually even the children of Viserys, like, oh God, actually after Aegon the Third, oh God, you got to go back into the timeline of everything. But let's see. Aegon the Third's children obviously has Baelor, who, like, they really, if you're going on faith Maester conspiracy, Baelor really screws up the realm. But then things are kind of put back on track. Well, no, they're not put back on track. Through the Rogare takeover with Viserys II, we see the death of dragons and no more real bloodline of dragon hatchers. And the bloodline of, you know, you get into the Blackfires with, like, you know, Aegon the Third's line goes into Blackfires and stuff like that, and the conspiracy continues if you want to get into the Blackfire Rebellion. But man, you know, I don't know what's good for the realm. What good's for the realm is for them to freaking stop feudalism. It's hard for me to say like what was good for the realm in the end. Aemond is not contradictory when he demands Luke's eye in the finale. Luke's eye is payment for flying about the realm trying to steal Aegon's throne. I'll have to reread that line. It's not a bad point. Did you think? Yeah, but doesn't he say? He says, I forget. Now I've got to look into this. He might have say like the eye for. Fuck. I have to go into the exact line, because you're right that he does say, off, you know, in my memory, he says that, did you think you could just fly about? And then he kind of says, I'm not going to fight you. And he's like, you don't have to fight. You just take out your eye as payment. And I thought he might have said payment for my eye, but I may have to double check on that. But it's an interesting idea that it was a different debt that he owed. I'm trying to. A lot of this dialogue is taken actually from Princess and the Queen, so I've got a. Um, maybe I could check if he mentions it here. Do, 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 do. No debt collectors. Oh well, I will go back and look at this and think about this. But I see what you're saying. But it's also, supposed to be eye for an eye, you know. Um, choose Tywin or Otto for hand. George R. R. Martin chose Tywin. Are we talking about show Tywin or show Otto or book Tywin or book Otto? Um, show Otto is an idiot. Show Otto is a fucking idiot. Like he keeps going to Dragonstone. Like what are you fucking doing? Like that is just idiocy. Absolute idiocy. Um uh so but then again, like Otto, like what is he able to achieve with his connections and family? Like the High Towers did more um for their cause. Like in the pack, his entourage might be more powerful than Tywin's entourage. Like what did the Lannisters ever do for him? So maybe I'm gonna choose Otto because he's got a better entourage. Even though Otto is a fucking idiot, he's got a very powerful family, and he's got all the maesters and the faith and stuff behind him. So I feel like Otto has more power attached to him, despite Otto being an idiot. So I'm going with Otto. So George R. R. Martin, I'm going against his opinion. From a business standpoint, would you reset the Star Wars EU or just build around Andor, like DC placing their bets on James Gunn? Um, from a business standpoint, Andor is a failure, which is too bad. No one's watching Andor. So no, I would not build things around Andor. From a business point of view, I would build things around Mandalorian and fucking Baby Yodas. Um, I mean, it's too bad. Now, with DC placing their bets on James Gunn, um, there's only so much you can make fun of before everything's kind of a joke. Like James Gunn's thing is like hilarious. I love fucking James Gunn's work, but at the same point time, like there's only so long you can be making fun of your properties. Like the whole thing, like the reason James Gunn works is that DC was so serious. So James Gunn suddenly taking a shit out of it, like taking the shit out of it is like refreshing. But if it's only James Gunn all the time, I don't know if that works. I think that I love James Gunn. I do. I think I think Suicide Squad 2 is a really good movie, really excellent movie. I think the Peacemaker, I was really expecting it to be bad, and it was really great. But I don't necessarily think that you can build a franchise around that. So I I don't think, I mean, really from a business standpoint, I don't necessarily think that like Star Wars is doing a bad job. They're making their money. They got their Mandalorian. They're selling their toys from a business standpoint. They're getting their money back. So uh, um, even though like I think Andor is a quality product, it's just I'm not the market. I'm not the market. You gotta sell the little kids. You gotta sell the little kids. Viserys' dream and prophecy seem like they've actually caused the dance. Could this be a reason it was added to the show? Dreams, prophecy, causing people to kill each other is very George R. R. Martin. It is very George R. R. Martin, but I'm not sure if that's brought in. Like I think the prophecy thing is to add stakes and just to add something that seems bigger than the feud over the throne. I think that if it were just like some people feuding over the throne, everybody would be like, who cares? Like, who cares? What's the bigger story? Why does this matter? We know that they're eventually going to lead to Daenerys, and Daenerys is going to die. So, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point? So, I think the prophecy stuff, um, is adding into that, trying to create bigger stakes, and perhaps leading into snow. Like, is is Arya like killing the Night's King really the end? Um, this is a franchise and stuff like that. And not everything's written, but I think they were trying to create bigger stakes. Like, this isn't just about the throne, this is about the world. This is about destiny. It's important who sits the throne. I think that's what they're trying to do. Um, but you're right that, if it were the way that that the prophecy was fake, or um, it being some sort of metaphor for religion, or delusional leaders thinking that they have this sort of grand purpose and things like this. So it's very, 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 very George R. R. Martin. Any theories on why one of the upcoming Dunk and Egg novellas is tentatively titled The Sellsword? Also, do you think George knows Linda is racist? On the second point, I think that people are very good at defending their friends and coming up with excuses and for people and things like that. Like, George himself has been accused of things and has gotten the wrath of toxic fandom and stuff like that. So he can just kind of assume that the same thing has happened to Linda. And so, it's very easy to like take something you like and then, come up with like coping mechanisms and excuses to justify it. Like, you wouldn't believe the number of messages I got from people like trying to tell me that the grifters I named in my video weren't actually racists and sexists. Like, and they've done shit that's way worse than Linda, so it's, people are very good at like making up excuses. So I think George can make up excuses. He plus it's just like his relationship is more with Elio anyway. So it's he kind of probably just doesn't put too much thought into it, makes excuses and moves on. These are his friends. Friends are very important to George R. R. Martin. He doesn't have, children, things like that. So it's because I don't know, like, many of you don't have kids, but for people who have kids, like, when you have kids, like, your friends kind of disappear or just pare down quite a bit. Like, but if you never have kids, like, friends stay really important. Like, the as they were for people that 20 somethings or 30 somethings out there, but like to 40 somethings like me, friends become a lot less important. But so I think George is, he's going to defend his friends and he's going to come up with reasons in his head. Now, as for why a Dunk and Egg novella is going to be called The Sellsword, I had not actually heard that it was going to be. Oh, here we go. The Sellsword, the Champion. I wonder how this just came from. When did you reveal this? Was this a how many seasons? Oh, this was 2015. The Sellsword, the Champion, the Kingsguard, the Lord Commander. And it was, but he was calling She-Wolves of Winterfell. He was not calling it the Sellsword yet. But I guess it's just looking for the various professions that Dunk can be that would be a different name, right? Because it all has to be Dunk, but it all has to be like a different profession. Like, even though he's a hedge knight throughout all of them, the hedge knight's just the first one. And in each of them, he's a sworn sword. Being a sworn sword is going into service for somebody is still the same thing. So, he was just finding different professions, I think, and he would write he hasn't written anything past like some of She-Wolves. So, um, and like he doesn't really know. So I think he was just coming up with like, what would a hedge knight do? Like, what are the possible professions that a hedge knight could be? Sellsword, champion. We kind of know he's going to be a Kingsguard Lord Commander, but I don't think there's anything much more to it than that. That he was just kind of coming up with possible professions that he could that Dunk could be. I mean, the household guard, the guard or something, like something. Um, we need rings of power to take a cue from Andor. Orc bureaucrats in Barad-dûr overseeing distribution of Maggoty bread. One does not simply walk into Barad-dûr office of procurement without the proper forms. Um, you know, not that they went too much into that, but there was, I will say, in Rings of Power, an unprecedented humanization of orcs that was not present in certainly the source material or Peter Jackson's trilogy. Like, this is the first time where you're really seeing like orcs as possibly people, and that's new. Or the fact that like not all evil people are even aligned. That Uncle Benjen's dark elf was like not aligned with Sauron, but still evil, and like what that means. It's Rings of Power. There are strengths to the series. Like, I'm not saying that it's a great series. It's not. It's quite dull. However, I will say that there are a lot of things that I noticed during my watch where I'm like, oh wow, that's an interesting rub that a writer chose to do that. That's kind of bold and interesting. And so one of them is the humanization of orcs. Another of them is actually there's an ongoing theme in there's parallel themes in all of the stories about children and their need to rebel against their parents and what that means and how they find a role in the world once they rebel from their parents. And this is prevalent in all of the characters, like in these big parallel scenes, like that it's important, like, oh, that over with the MILF, that her son is rebelling and what that means, or the a Durin rebelling against his father, or the Nori rebelling against her people and taking in the Meteor Man. There's a lot of like parallel themes about charity and what it means like to take people in and care for them, and how sometimes you're burned and how sometimes it pays off and kindness pays off. Like Galadriel, like takes in someone and saves them and is double crossed, while Nori takes in somebody and her kindness is you know produces probably Gandalf, or the village has a lot of trust and stuff like that where people infiltrate and things like that. And so there are some like complicated themes in Rings of Power. I'm not saying that the writing is freaking fantastic, but there was thought. It's certainly not a dumpster fire. Like, it's certainly there is some care to it. And I think that like people that are saying it's like the worst thing ever that's just an overstatement. But there's actually a lot of interesting aspects that they add to the show. Now, a lot of this has been done in other fantasy book stuffs already, so it's not necessarily too revolutionary. It's only revolutionary in the sense that they did it to fucking Lord of the Rings. That's it. But I don't know. I'm finding myself like defending Rings of Power more than I should. Like, it's a dull show, but it's not that bad. It's okay. It's beautiful. The fight scenes are fantastic. Some of the best fight scenes I've ever seen. Some of the best cinematography and CGI I've ever seen. Ultimately, I was entertained by House of the Dragon. Did it move too fast? Yes. Did it have more dragons? Yes. Cool. But it had enough ambiguity, good acting, and catering to keep us coming back. House of the Dragon should turn into Targaryen spinoffs. Yeah. Yeah. That's more or less my beliefs on the show. Like the show was solid. It was very entertaining. All of the I would say that it's pretty clear the faults are it moved way too fast. This should have been 2 seasons instead of one, and that it should have been they needed to work better at communicating their themes in between episodes. The time skips were really jarring, which would have helped if it were 2 seasons instead of one. And those like shock moments were there was a lot of shock moments that threatened to freaking derail like so many episodes and did derail so many episodes. Like just ridiculous stuff, like Alicent nearly seeing her brother murdered in front of her violently at a tourney, and then going over and like somewhat flirting with Daemon right afterwards. Like what? Like people getting murdered at weddings, dragons busting through floors, like one man superhero in the middle of war, like taking on arrows from everywhere. Like there's a lot of ridiculousness that they just shoved in there. Children getting their eyes cut out and being calm, or like two women like trying to stab each other in a big room of people and no one doing anything. Like they wanted their shock moments. If we took away the shock moments and you made it 2 seasons, man, it would be like so great. But that's it. Oh yeah, Daemon killing his wife, but this is more or less I agree with this. Vale Witch imagery, Three Sisters Macbeth reference, castles named Strong Song, Runestone, Mountains of the Moon, Witch Isle, Wickeden, meaning candles or Waxley. Could it be a Wiccan den? That's interesting. I mean, it's something I haven't really thought about. I mean, certainly so much stuff in the Vale is being named after Lysa and her as a character. And I'd have to go into these different characters and think about them being barren women and being like vengeful barren women and what that kind of means. But I think a lot of it has to do with that. Because I mean, moon, is kind of associated with being woman versus the sun. Like you kind of have this Apollo, Diana, like balance in the writing, and so a lot of the references to the moon tea, even are references to women. So it is about like entering this land of Lysa. But yeah, for me to think about, I'd have to go back and think about each of these characters, like the Three Sisters and Macbeth and stuff like that, and if how much that is about, how much that parallels to Lysa, because I think that's really the key. The other big parallel of the Eyrie has to do with Windhaven. Like a lot of stuff is focused on the Windhaven story, but other than but a lot of that's just names rather than like themes. Do you know anything about the Elden Ring, George R. R. Martin's Elden Ring lore? I'm not sure how much work he really did on the game. So I've read a little bit on the Elden Ring lore, and a lot has to do with like trees and ghosts living in trees and things like this. So I think there's some of that, but George, by his own admission, and I've seen him in interviews talking about this, kind of says that it was years and years and years ago, and he doesn't remember very much of what he did. And he wrote kind of this world, and then a lot of it's been changed because video games like have a lot of development time. And so he's like, over the course of like 5 or 6 years, he kind of forgets what he wrote, and then things get changed and then kind of get put in. but I think there are some people that have pointed out exactly kind of what sounds like George R. R. Martin, and I think a lot of it has to do with like the 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 ghosts and the trees and that kind of like essence and afterlife being trapped in various things. He did seem to know about the runes a bit when I've heard him in discussions about it or something, about collecting runes. And MacGuffins aren't exactly a George R. R. Martin thing. So it's interesting that he had to write something involving MacGuffins. But yeah, but I'm sorry I don't know that much about it. I just kind of know what George has kind of said. But I have had other people kind of say, oh, these and these and these things are really like quite similar. Um, Mainly to deal with like, you know, ghosts and afterlives and living forever inside like trees and shit. Let's see. Fire and Blood Aemond is interesting. We never get into his head, but he's regent. Sets aside his betrothal, huge, to marry a witch. Gives his pregnant wife a dragon egg and son that we don't know what happened to. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I think they were trying to. George was trying to create some sort of like parallel to Damon, obviously, with some of the same activity. But let's uh, let's get into of his later character. As regent, Aemon gathered an army together with Kristen Cole, marched against Daemon at Harrenhal. During their march, King's Landing fell to Rhaenyra and Daemon. After recapturing Harrenhal, Aemon ordered the deaths of some and strong. I knew all this. Alys Rivers was spared. And here we go. Alys Rivers was spared and became Aemon's bedmate. Alys prevented Aemon from strangling the squire, who informed Harrenhal of the Greens to defeat the Battle of the Lakeshore. Aemon and Kristen Cole split up, with Aemon taking Vhagar to burn numerous aligned settlements throughout the Riverlands. Lady Sabitha Frey seized Harrenhal and Alys, but Aemon eventually returned to rescue his lover. That's right. Now, I think if you're going like conspiracy, there are these moments where the greens and the blacks kind of like fall apart, and you've got these like internal love situations that kind of like cause people to have a misstep. Nettles being like the thing for Damon, and the the man the bastard situations with Rhaenyra and Alan and Hall, like Adam of Hall and stuff with the battles of Tumbleton are like insane breakdown of the blacks. But I do wonder about how much Alys Rivers, who is a strong, was purposely trying to go in there to create chaos, and bring Aemon's downfall. Um, that's because obviously it's the strongs. We've got Laris and Harwin and all of these people that are causing trouble. Council of 101. So I think there's some of that in there, but of course also we're supposed to get these, I don't know, like feelings about, Aemond is supposed to remind us of Bloodraven, and we're getting all of these like connections to Harrenhal and I mean Catelyn family is from Harrenhal and stuff like that, and the right genes coming together, and George is just kind of reminding us of all of these sorts of things as well, that the different blood comes in different places. Um but yeah, I mean, when I eventually get there with overanalyzing House of the Dragon, I'll study this a bit more and what I think. But or George tries to create his parallels, and parallels all over the time, all over the place. I mean, obviously it also connects to the Duncan the Small, and like him giving up the throne for Jenny of Oldstones and things like that. Like there's something about these these Riverland girls, just like there's something about these North girls, just something about these Targaryen girls, they all got their special genes. Um, why is the show trying to downplay Aegon's connection to Sunfire? In Fire and Blood, Aegon and Sunfire have the strongest dragon rider connection in the series. I think it was probably just a timing thing. We never we see Aegon flying Sunfire like once, I think there was just like time to introduce the dragons. They may have not even finished his CGI. You know, which all of these things kind of take time. I don't necessarily think that the show is actively trying to downplay it. I just think that they didn't have the time to develop that dragon and that relationship. We barely got Meleys, which is incredible, right? We got Meleys just at the end. Rhaenys was walking around the whole season, and then we never saw her on her dragon until the very end, and we're like, oh right, she's a dragon rider. So they were downplaying all of these dragons for a long time. Vhagar is not an important dragon until he's the most important dragon in the world. So I wouldn't read into it too much. I just think they just didn't have the time to build that up. Is the Maester conspiracy just Maesters doing it, or is it them ordered by the High Towers? Which one is better in your opinion? I think it is the High Towers at the top, and then that they have connections in both the Faith and the Maesters, who then go on and do their things. And obviously we have various moments with the Maesters in the dance. Specifically, I'd say the three big ones are Orwell's negotiation with Rhaenyra, which goes pretty crappy. We have Boros Baratheon listening to the Maester with Luke and Aemond. And then we have there's a Maester situation regarding communication with Nettles and Daemon. And so those situations really show that the Maesters are players. But there's also these situations with the Faith looking like they're players, and that's mainly the storming of the Dragon Pit, where it seems to be religious zealots coming in. But then we also have why the Faith was so against Daemon Blackfyre, and why the High Septon, was saying all of these things about bad about Daemon Blackfyre, what was so bad about him. And so are they they seem to be very focused on blood and dragons and things like that. And the Faith ends up very against Bloodraven too, but no, I'm sorry. I guess he was the guy who was the person that was preaching against Bloodraven was kind of a zealot by himself. So I don't know, but so there could be, I don't know, Septon Eustace's writing, Septon Barth, might also be part of this Septon conspiracy on top of it. But we don't see much communication between the Septons and the Maesters outside of the fact that they're both in Old Town and both the High Towers being patrons of both. Now keep in mind that the High Towers are often the High Septon is a High Tower. They control the most devout. So if it were the other way around, the Maesters controlling things and the High Towers being subservient to the Maesters, they would have to order High Towers to somehow join the Faith of the Seven and then rise up to become High Septon and things like that. The pyramid is just kind of weird and around. So I would say it's easier if it's High Towers top down, Maesters Faith, because then they can order their people. They read the prophecies, they get obsessed with their prophecies and what they should be doing, and then they order their High Towers to do their thing. Um, that's my guess. Um, Cheese will be masked, true George R. R. Martin fashion. I hope so. I hope so. Keep the ambiguity going. I think the worst thing would be that they're just two random guys that um, uh, Massaria hires. I think that would be the weakest thing. I think it would go against Massaria's personality and that they've established in the show, and ruin the mystery. But I think that would be much better is if they had masks, and then later they can decide if they want that mask, if they want that character to be a servant of Laris, to be Laris, to be a servant of somebody else. But that's that. I think that's a good idea, and I hope they go with that. Um, Based on the show's conclusion of the Laenor storyline, would you give any merit to the theory idea that Varys is actually Aegon the Fifth's Targaryen egg? Um, oh, that Varys is actually Aegon the Fifth Targaryen. Uh, he's a little young, right? Or a little. I mean, Aegon the Fifth is lives, what, a hundred years before um Varys is born. Um Around. That's a tough one. Um I mean, if you were gonna make Varys a different Aegon, it would make a lot more sense. I think there's, an interesting idea that Varys shaves his head and that he actually has silver hair because he's something or other, whether a Blackfire or a lost Targaryen of Sarah, or or a child of um, 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 the guy who drank the blood, the who drank the wildfire. God, who had Magor. I'm blanking, but there's so many lost Targaryens that it's kind of a joke now. I talk about them being like lost Jedi's, like, oh, you're the last Jedi, except for the other fucking 50 that are floating around. But I think there's a very good chance that Varys is a that has some Targaryen blood, but I don't know if he could actually. He can't really actually be Aegon the Fifth. Like, we're just timeline wise, like that just doesn't work out. Um, Chances of seeing a glass candle in House of the Dragon with Hobart. Oh, that's. I mean, that would be fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, had I done the show myself, I would have totally had an Old Town plot with an Old Town character, an Old Town point of view, one in Lice, one in Old Town, one in Winterfell, one in King's Landing. That's how I would have done the show. Um, but will we actually get scenes in Old Town with the glass candle? I doubt it. I mean, we've already kind of established that their communication system is with ravens. We see Otto with Raven with doing his letters constantly. If he were getting dreams or whatever, that would be something. Now, that the glass candles are the things that actually made Viserys have his dream of Aegon, of a son. Now, that would be interesting. But if they had a actual glass candle and they could plant dreams like that, you'd think they would have planted one about the white stag or a large stag, or sent him more dreams or whatever, to really push home that Aegon is the heir, versus just kind of saying um, you know to have him have a bunch of dreams when he was young, and then to kind of stop. So, as much as I think it would be really fun to have glass candles and have glass candles be the source of Viserys' dreams, I don't think we're probably going to get that. I think that's too much of a fan wish. Plus, the glass candles aren't on, so maybe that's it. They were turned on and fairly recently in the story. Um, If Book Aemon gave Alice, pregnant with his son, an egg and him, and Daemon died, isn't that a blood sacrifice? Um, could be. It depends how you see it. I'm going to do a. I started writing a video script about hatching dragons, and um, it's. I think that I there are a lot of elements that we kind of see to Dany's hatching, right? Where you say, okay, all of these elements are here. We've got a woman, we've got a pregnant woman, we've got a stillborn or miscarried child, we've got a king's blood, we've got a blood sacrifice, we have a fire, we have a spell, we have a comet, we have prophetic dreams, we have all these sorts of things. We have prophecy, we have bloodlines, like we have all these elements thrown in there, and we're trying to isolate what actually makes what actually makes dragons hatch. um and isolating it down is hard because we don't know about what made the other dragons hatch. If we go way back to Urax, and or or Naga, or the dragon that Florian faced. Like, where did those dragons come from? Like, are they even real? Were they real or just legends? Okay, well, even if we then go on, like, what caused Vagar to hatch? What caused Meraxes to hatch? What caused Mourning and Moondancer and things like that? Like, do you need fire? Do you need a do you need a spell? Do you need a blood sacrifice? Do you need a stillbirth? Do you need a pregnancy? I'm going to go through this and try to figure out what the best explanation is. But yeah, anything can be considered a blood sacrifice. Anything. But she was already pregnant, so is that enough? I don't know. Maybe the blood sacrifice thing is a red herring, because so we'll see. We'll see. But that video's coming. Maybe the Green Men are scheming to keep Daemon from ruling. Could explain him slashing at the werewood, threatening to burn the Iron of Fate. Threatening to burn the Isle of Faces. Yeah, I wish we knew more about the Green Men, and the Order of the Green Hand, and all of the kind of stuff. I don't even think that George knows. Like, I think it's just one of these things that he has placed in as an eventual kind of end of the show, and then at the end of the story, but he hasn't quite figured out what they were. All we know in the dance is that Adam Velaryon was said to have flown his dragon Sea Smoke to the Isle of Faces and taken counsel with the Green Men. And that's kind of, that's kind of all we know. All we know about them. Could they be the ones scheming? I guess if they've got access to trees and they can send prophetic dreams. Like, are we talking book or show? Maybe it's not Maesters the whole time. It's actually like the Green Men or the Three-Eyed Crow. All these things are possibilities. We have no idea. Brutal cold opening of Blood and Cheese for season 2, episode 1. Yeah, I thought they might save it for the end of the episode because they like to do, but it could be shocking to do it right at the beginning too. Like, we're getting this stuff going, but they tend to like their shocks at the end. Not that there aren't shocks in the beginning too, but or in the middle of an episode. Like, that tourney was right in the middle. All those shocks in our first episode, but for the most part, they like the shocks at the end, right? Daemon's speed run, Joffrey Lonmouth dying, the cat fight with the dagger, Rhaenys breaking through the floor. They like to save it for the end, so I think I would put it on. I think we'd most likely see it at the end of episode 1. I feel like they super glossed over the effects of Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage. Wasn't that the one thing, including the king, was fearing? The wedding just sort of happens and they all move on. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like the High Towers from the beginning kind of, I mean, Otto is like, oh my gosh, Daemon ruling would be the worst thing ever. And Daemon being king consort is still him somewhat ruling. I mean, they're a sexist society. They should assume that like he's just going to take control over Rhaenyra, and that's going to be that. Viserys seemed to be uncomfortable with the idea of Daemon and Rhaenyra marrying after the offer. And so he also seems just completely fine with it. You're right that it's very inconsistent, that this thing that from the beginning, let's keep Daemon away from power. And then nothing is kind of done like after that. Like he's not even mentioned. Like when they talk about the succession, they don't say like, well, we can't give it to Rhaenyra. She's married to Daemon. Like, you know, that should be like one of the big things, like right from the beginning. Like we've been over this. Daemon can't rule. He's got to be another Maegor the Cruel. Never mentioned. So yeah, it is an oversight. It is an oversight that's glossed over quite a bit. Everyone's just kind of, even though Rhaenyra says like, oh, people are going to fear me if this is a really great idea to pretend to kill Laenor because people are going to fear me and think I'm capable of anything. No one thought that. Like, no, except for Corlys and Rhaenys, no one thought that. Like, Alicent never mentions, holy shit, Rhaenyra killed her husband. Like, it's never brought up. It doesn't scare the Greens at all, even though her motivation for doing it, besides like freeing Laenor, is to scare the Greens. None of the Greens ever say, holy shit, Rhaenyra means business. Like nobody brings that up. Yeah, you're completely right. That was glossed over and time skipped away. But yeah, but I say like these episodes that don't have Ryan Condal's hand in them have their problems, have their disconnects, especially with the time skips. Needed to go slower. Okay. Game of Thrones had more Stark and Direwolf time than House of the Dragon and Dragons. Well, season 1 of Game of Thrones was a bit easier because they used live action pups, right? And live action dogs. Which not that that's cheap, because it's not, like, to have those animal trainers in and everything, but it's a lot cheaper than CGI. So yeah, we got a lot of scenes with those with direwolf, because you could just, at that point the direwolves were small and you could just throw in a dog. Now, once you go beyond season 1, the direwolves start becoming pretty scarce. So, you know, let's be honest about that. You know, but yeah, season 1 Game of Thrones, like, you find the direwolves in the snow. Yeah, you've got Nymeria going out and attacking Joffrey. You've got Lady getting killed. You've got Jon Snow with Ghost at the wall. You've got a lot of scenes of Grey Wind and Summer like sitting on the bed and attacking the cat's paw and stuff like that. You're totally right that there's many more direwolves like shown in season 1 of Game of Thrones, but they do disappear once you get to the point where you've got to CGI them. They're all of a sudden like, where are these direwolves? Where are the direwolves? mm. How do you see the overall structure of the next 3 seasons, assuming there ends up being 4? I think what makes the most sense is season 2 ending after Rhaenyra takes KL, and season 3 ends with her fleeing KL. Yeah, I agree. I think that I think they were going really fast, and they perhaps set up a possibility of doing the show in 2 seasons if season 1 bombed, um, or maybe 3. And I think now that the series is very successful, I think they're going to try to slow it down. But slowing it down is kind of hard. But I do think it's kind of funny that like we go through these huge time jumps. Like between episode 1 and 2, there's a 6-month time jump. Between 2 and 3, there's a 2.5-year time jump or something like that. Between 3 and 4, it's another couple of years, another year, and then there's not much time between. There's like a week between like 4 and 5, but all of a sudden you're going 10 years, like, and then I guess there's not much time jump between 6 and 7, maybe again a week, and then you're going like 6 years, but then you get to the last episodes, 8, 9, and 10, and it's like 24 hours each one. Like the 3 episodes, 8, 9, and 10 all take place within 3 days of each other, which is an incredibly fast pace. Incredibly, like, I'm sorry, slow pace when you consider like you were doing 10-year time jumps, that you're going to have 3 episodes all within 72 hours. Like that's crazy. But season 2 could easily be that. Like it could easily be like day by day. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? Even though the dance takes place over, a good year. They could easily just do like day by day or, unknown amount of time. But I think that you are right, that you could now have a situation where Rhaenyra takes King's Landing at the end of season 2. I think season 3, or somewhere you have got to have the. I mean, it'd be nice to have the big climax of a season be the Battle of the God's Eye. But and then if you really wanted to keep going, even though Hour of the Wolf is a really short period of time, you could if you're doing an episode a day, you can do that kind of stuff if you've introduced the characters. But I think that's a good breaking point, like Rhaenyra taking King's Landing as the end of season 2. I think that's a good idea. Maybe I missed this, but there did not seem to be much mention of the seasons in House of the Dragon. Is this a missed opportunity, especially all the time skips? You are absolutely right that we don't really get to see a good winter. Now I'm actually curious about these kinds of things, because they're not. I don't remember them ever being kind of remembered mentioned in the source material either. Like, what were the? Was there a winter? No. Okay, let's look at the seasons. So, okay. In the source material, there is something called the Year of the Red Spring, which all of a sudden there's a bunch of sudden deaths of nobles of note. And then when they go to war, it's supposed to be autumn. And so, and the Dance of the Dragons kind of is fought at the beginning of winter, and the Hour of the Wolf, I guess there's a metaphor of like the Hour of the Wolf and the Starks kind of being there at the start of winter, and bringing on like The post Dance of the Dragons winter is supposed to be very, very harsh, lasting 6 years. And then when when Viserys is like kind of takes over, they call that the Rogare Spring because his wife is Rogare. But so yeah, I mean, we'll see if they do it. We'll see if they do it in the show here. That like the beginning of like, I guess you could have a very powerful scene at the end of like the Starks coming in to like rule in the Hour of the Wolf and snow over King's Landing. That would be a pretty cool like that would be pretty cool imagery that you could do there. Um, but you're kind of right that they should have mentioned that it's autumn in order to set that up. But we'll see what happens. Or we could have seen a White Raven or something at some point. Um, uh, hey Preston, huge fans of yours from ages ago from Ireland. Apologies for missing the show. I'm super drunk. Looking forward to watching this in the morning. Thank you, thank you. I had a great time in Ireland. I mean, I was there for a wedding, and I went, I essentially just like went to this wedding and then drove to the Cliffs of Moher, which are Cliffs of Moher are, if you're gonna see like, I don't know, besides like Norway, which has the most beautiful scenery anywhere in Europe, like it's hard to deny that like the Cliffs of Moher, some of them like when it comes to like beautiful things in Europe. I mean, maybe the Alps, but like beautiful things in Europe, like nature wise, like the Cliffs of Moher are just an incredible sight. And I've never experienced wind that strong. Um, actually, had some friends who were casual watchers and found that the episodes were too slow for their liking. Huh? What even? LOL. Jeez, that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, I could see what. Yeah, maybe I need more like I just can't see it with a casual eye. Like when people like are in a room talking about politics, like we know as like fans, like we know about everything they're talking about, and like it's all very essential kind of stuff. But like with a casual who's like, I don't care about that house. I don't care about that house. Have something happen. Would they want more action? More ice zombies and stuff. Huh. Yeah, I guess. There's a lot of like potential fights that happen in like everybody pulling out their swords on the fucking bridge at Dragonstone, like like where nothing happens, but a bunch of swords are pulled out. They're gonna fight and then they don't. They added in that uh, the sword fight at the Grand Sept just for the hell of it, to add some action. They're definitely doing their best to add action, but that's kind of funny though. I have to start asking my mother like when she gets bored because she's watching the show. Um, I finished Rings of Power and I've concluded so many people unfairly criticized it that certain well-intentioned people want to make it seem okay. It's a huge missed opportunity. Meh is generous. Meh is horrible for this project, and meh is horrible for this project. Um, that I mean, that's the thing is it is a middle of the road show, and so when I hear people saying it's like an absolute travesty or the worst thing ever, like I roll my eyes because it's like, no, it's not. It's not the worst thing ever. It's not the best thing ever. It's just kind of middle of the road with like very specific things that are that are excellent, but things I don't necessarily care about that much. Like I've never seen better battle scenes in a TV show than Rings of Power. I've never seen better visuals of nature uh, than in Rings of Power. Like just really interesting things like that. But at the same time, like I don't really care about battles that much. Like I admit, like looking, I was like, whoa, those are really interesting battles. They're really great. I can see what's going on. They tell a story. They're original. Um, but I don't really care that much. Like like that's not. I'm here for the story and like if it's entertaining and stuff like that. So the few things that were really excellent, I just I didn't care that much. But also the things that a lot of people really cared about, like the lore, I didn't care that much about. I know about like Lord of the Rings lore, but I don't really care that much. Like I'm not emotionally invested in it. I'm kind of here for like a good story. Um, they had the elements of a good story. I think it was just executed way too slow. Like when you say like, what did Nori do over 8 episodes? Well, she found a meteor man. That's all she did. Like, you're like, okay, and then they wanted to kick him out, and she they didn't, and then she followed him. That was it. So, um, so yeah, I that's about it. It's I don't. They were successful though. Like it got incredible ratings. Like and everyone was talking about it. So they actually achieved everything they wanted to achieve. They can go forward and do cinematic universe and earn lots, and have their successful show. I don't understand what Amazon Prime's like goals are in the future, but they can do that, and they seem to want to do that, and they got the ratings. They're going to keep going. So they succeed. They did everything they wanted to do. So it was successful in that sense. What's your favorite Shakespeare play? Um, Believe it or not, I have read or seen nearly every Shakespeare play. There was a period where I was like trying to get them done, um, and having actually like seen or read nearly all of them. I don't think I've ever read like King John or something. I don't think I've read King John or some of the random comedies. Um, but I'm going to be boring and say that Hamlet is by far the best one. Like, there's a reason Hamlet is the famous one, and it's because it's the best one. Like, I can't. I also really like Othello. I think Othello is really good. Um, some people's favorites, like a lot of people really like the histories, and I don't like the histories very much. And a lot of people really like the comedies, and I don't really like the comedies very much. I like a lot of the tragedies. So I do like King Lear and things like that. But I like Othello and Hamlet the most. So I just think they're the richest. There's the most to think about and the most to theorize about, the most hidden meaning, the most with like different interpretations. That's all. I don't know. Is Alice a strong? They try to claim she's Lionel's bastard, but she's also as old as him, 40s. Seems like one of those Maester mistakes. Um, yeah, let me look this up again because um and then of course like what are they really trying to communicate? Um Alicent's origins are shrouded in mystery. It's unclear if she was ever acknowledged as a bastard or simply claimed to be. According to Grand Maester Munkin and Septon Eustace, Alice was a bastard sired by Lionel Strong on an unknown woman when he was young. Munkin claims Alicent was a serving wench with an interest in potions, while Eustace claims she was a woods witch. Court fool. Mushroom instead claims that Alice was from an older generation and that she served as a wet nurse to Lionel's sons, Harwin and Larys, and possibly even Lionel. Mushroom wrote that Alice was an enchantress who bathed in maiden's blood to be youthful. Her own children were stillborn. Both Eustace and Munkin considered both Eustace and Munkin considered Mushroom's claims fantastical, but they agreed that Alice looked unusually young for her age, as she had to be at least 40 by the outbreak of the Dance of the Dragons. So, so obviously there's a bunch of stuff going on with this description of Alice. So like obviously with like mentioning that she was like woods witch and everything, we're supposed to think of Jenny of Old Stones, and with her bathing in blood and doing all of that, we're supposed to be thinking of Danelle Lothston and stuff like that. So, Catelyn and Sansa and all these sorts of people are connected in various ways to Jenny of Old Stones and Danelle Lawston and stuff like that, at least metaphorically at various points in the story. Perhaps actually like lineage wise, but at least metaphorically. So, he's making all these like random parallels that she has some sort of like special blood. Plus, she's a strong and all of this kind of stuff. Now, is she actually Lionel Strong's bastard? Well, let's see how old Lionel Strong is. He's said to be. Let's see. That's the thing, is we don't really know Lionel Strong's age, do we? Let's look this stuff up. I love these like Lionel Strong calculations because I've talked to the person that actually like did all the age calculations on the wiki. He has at least 4 children. The eldest of Harwin. Harwin was born in 90. Lionel would be at least 12 years old at that moment. So Harwin is about the same age as Alys. So I don't necessarily think it's unrealistic that she's Lionel's bastard. The only thing that goes against that idea is if she was actually Lionel's wet nurse, because then she's a bit old. But again, it's a mushroom tale. So who knows? So somebody pointed out to me that there's only 2 Strongs that we know the hair color of. One is the Lucamore Strong, Lucamore the Lusty, was blonde, and Alys Rivers has black hair, which is funny because all the Strong boys have, Luke, Jason, and Joffrey have brown hair. But the question is, are the Strongs a bunch of blondes? Does black hair give away the fact that Alys is not actually a Strong, or does it matter? But who knows? Who knows? I mean, there's just not enough. There's just not enough information to make a judgment one way or the other. Like we have too many contradicting sources. So it seems like if she's the same age as Harwin, roughly, he Lionel could possibly make that, unless we're assuming that Harwin also isn't his child. But it doesn't seem unrealistic that she would be a bastard, unless we believe Mushroom. Dun, 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 dun. I'd love to know the thoughts on Brazilian elections today. Carmine was supposed to call in. I don't know where he is. He's been busy or something. But I think look, it's not great to see another person like who did 2 terms before come back. You get a little too cult of personality about stuff, but Lula was definitely the lesser of 2 evils in that Brazilian election. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, not crazy about Lula, but he's just, it's lesser of 2 evils. Should the Lannister role be expanded for casuals? I do. I think the Lannister role was expanded for casuals, and it probably should have been expanded more. But again, they just had too many characters, and they had too long of a period of time. Had they done season 1, episodes 1 to 5, it would have been, then they would have a lot more time to explore like who Tywin Lannister is, and like we get to know who Jason is, but we don't really get to know who Tywin is as a character, which is too bad. I mean, the Tywin that we see raving about the Stepstones War is a very different character than the Tywin who is on the council at the end. The Tywin at the end almost seemed like Jason, he seemed. So it would have been nicer to have more time with all of these characters. I mean, name a character that you didn't want more time with. Like even the White Worm. Like, I wanted more time with her, more time to explore like who this character was and everything. Every single character needed more time, which is too bad. Too bad. And it would have. So we needed 10 episodes of season one, then over five. I mean, of the younger cast, because there's just so much lost with the time skips and the actor skips. Like I say, like the actors were interpreting their characters differently, and we needed more time. We needed more time for. What's sad is with the actor switches is that the actors didn't have time to observe the final product and what was established on screen to inform their portrayals later. So even though I love Olivia Cook's portrayal of Alicent and I love Emily Carey's portrayal of Alicent, they're two different Alicents, and you know, it's one like it. They don't really make sense in the end, especially considering that like Emily Carey is like portraying Alicent as somewhat in love with Rhaenyra, and Olivia Cook is not. Like very very different, very different characters. Emily Carey like portrays herself as like hating motherhood and not being into it, and Alicent portrays herself as like motherhood is the most important thing, and like she loves Aegon so much. If we had that break between seasons, they could have observed each other's like choices and communicated better on it. But you need not be on Westeros for dragons to keep surviving. I've tried to tell you about this. There's so many clues, mostly not in the main book. It's not that I don't think dragons can survive everywhere. But what I'm talking about with like the legendary dragons, Naga, Urax, and Florian's dragon, we don't hear about those dragons having riders. We don't hear about them having psychic connections and things like that. And so the question is like, how did they hatch? Did they hatch in the wild? Do dragons hatch in the wild without a human connection to them? And if so, like, why didn't Dany's dragons hatch? Like, why did those eggs stay dormant for so long? So I don't think the land is very important. I think more that the people are important. Like, I think some people might think, oh, you need to heat them up or something, or but I think dragons can live anywhere. I mean, we know that they at least live in Valyria. We know that some dragon lords took them to various colonies where they fought. We know that they live in King's Landing. We know they live on Dragonstone. We know that they live in the Vale pretty well. So, and at least for short periods of time, they've gone north and stuff like that. I just think it's like the birthing and survival of dragons as a species might require a human element for reproduction. So that's all. How do you think the show will explain only Rhaenys going to Rook's Rest and getting ambushed? Seems like a silly decision on the Black's part. I mean, I guess she's just going to be on patrol or something. I mean, there's a lot of silly decisions that they make, and these are kind of all George's like they sent Luke alone, right? Like what? Why would Luke get sent alone to Storm's End? Like, but yeah. I mean, so for I know what you're saying, like it, but these are a lot of times are George's fault. Yeah, for some reason, like let's go into the Battle of Rook's Rest here. So essentially, Kristen Cole planned a trap for the Blacks at Rook's Rest. And so he marched out of King's Landing with 100 knights, 500 men at arms, a bunch of sellswords, forced the submission of Rosby and Stokeworth, and took their men, add them to the host, and then Lord Staunton closed the gates of Rooks Rest and was unable to prevent Kristen from burning his fields and killing the small folk and livestock. And so he asked for assistance from Rhaenyra. So essentially, Kristen Cole was killing civilians in order to provoke the blacks into taking action. And then Rhaenys came to quickly act, and she arrived, and instead he had a bunch of archers and scorpions fire at Meleys, and the dragon was unharmed for those attacks. But then Aegon came in with Sunfire and Aemond with Vhagar, and they essentially just crushed Rhaenys. So I guess they're going to say that they needed to act fast to save these small folk that were getting murdered, and that they really thought that Kristen Cole was alone and that the dragons weren't there, and didn't know that it was a big ambush. It was a pretty brutal move, actually, from Kristen Cole and their group to just go and start murdering small folk. So they played our heartstrings. I think they're going to play it like that. Then they're going to play the heartstrings, like, oh my gosh, civilians are dying. Rhaenys needs to go in to save them, even though she doesn't care about small folk earlier, and they're going to have the ambush. But it is silly to send one dragon at a time to do anything when you know that they've got plenty of other dragons. But I guess maybe they thought they could get there and back before anybody else had dragons around. Book Aemond is my favorite villain from the dance. When you called him an anime villain, I had to defend him. All good. No, I think we say more in the sense that he's an anime villain in that, like, he's this angry cackling guy. The one patch thing is pretty cliche, but like that's just so George. He has so many characters with one patch eye that it almost becomes a joke. Like, but Aemond, I mean, he's a good favorite to have. I mean, not in the sense that he's a good person. He's a horrible person, but there's few characters where you really feel like you know them. So it's like, who's your favorite character going to be? Is it going to be Aemond, or is it going to be Cole? Is it going to be Rhaenyra, Alicent? Not too many people are fleshed out. Everybody's not fleshed out very much, but at least he's fleshed out some. This is back at Rings of Power. The Sauron reveal should have been Anatar instead. So Anatar, yes, in I know that in official lore that Sauron was supposed to be really beautiful in the second age. This is probably Carmine being like, Carmine says he's having an error and can't join my eCam. So he's supposed to have this beautiful look to him, and so, like, some people were thinking, well, this character, this is the Anatar, that he's got an interesting look to him, odd, perhaps beautiful, depending on your, like, ideals of beauty, and that would have been a more accurate Sauron, versus, like, the ruggedly handsome guy that we got in Rings of Power, who eventually gets the reveal. One of the things that we were talking about with Carmine and I were talking about with Yoisten from Men of the West is that um, whether or not they were forced to make certain changes due to copyright, like because they only own the copyright to Lord of the Rings, but they don't own the copyright to the Silmarillion, did they have to actually do things differently in order to fear violation of copyright? And that's an interesting rub that goes into the creation of Rings of Power. Like we were discussing, like Superman comes into the public domain fairly soon, but not all of Superman. Like he's like Superman as a flying character, for example, doesn't come in immediately. Or Superman as a character who's immune to kryptonite. Kryptonite as a concept doesn't come in until later. So if you were to create a Superman character when he goes into public domain, but you still had him fly, you could get sued. So you'd have to do, oh, he's Superman, but he's a super fast swimmer, and then you wouldn't get sued because, and this actually happened with Enola Holmes. Believe it or not, the fucking things people sue over. So I don't know if you saw the Enola Holmes movie, but like Sherlock Holmes is a character in it, but he is not so calculating and Asperger's like as like say Sherlock, the show Sherlock, or a lot of portrayals of Sherlock as this like super genius who's like very not emotional and elementary, dear Watson, we're gonna do this, and he doesn't have now the in Enola Holmes, Sherlock Holmes like seems like a regular human being with full emotions who's emotionally adjusted, who like feels love and hate and anger and all of these things like a normal human would. Now, if you read Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's like catalog of Sherlock Holmes, which nearly all are in the public domain except for a handful of stories at the end of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's life, Sherlock makes an evolution from his sort of autistic character into becoming a regular kind of like human being who shows love and emotion. And so because this character in Enola Holmes acted like a regular human being rather than an autistic idiot, the Doyle estate argued that they were in violation of copyright because they put in late Sherlock Holmes instead of early Sherlock Holmes. Only early Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain. Late Sherlock Holmes is not. And they fucking got a payout settlement for it. The people that made the movie were like, fine, fuck it. Fine, here's your fucking money. And they gave him like millions of dollars over the fact that like Sherlock Holmes acted like a normal human being. Like that was some sort of copyright infringement. So I do wonder about like what choices, like were they bound in Rings of Power to actually make it significantly different from the Silmarillion in order to avoid copyright? Gotta watch the Peripheral. It's gonna be Amazon, October 21st. Let's see here. Oh, is this the show? Oh shit. Yeah. Now I know. So the Peripheral is done by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, who created Westworld. And when I watched the previews for this, it so had the feeling of Westworld. But yes, no, I am absolutely going to watch the Peripheral. I like, even though Nolan and Joy, like they're not perfect in their creations, okay? I appreciate that both Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy are so ambitious in what they do. They put out stuff on TV with ideas that have never been put in TV. I'm not saying they're executed great. I'm not, but I like how much thought they put into what they do, and I like their attempts. Like you're not going to land you're not going to make ace the landing every time. But I appreciate the fact that they try, and I hope this is pretty good. Pretty good. Set in a future where technology has subtly altered society, a woman discovers a secret connection to an alternate reality as well as a dark future of her own. It sounds very, very interesting. So I'm going to watch The Peripheral, and maybe I'll try to get Carmine to watch it too. But thank you for reminding me. Yeah. Am I a misogynist for being a Green supporter? So both sides suck right now. Okay, both sides suck. Let's be honest. And I don't think that I've heard argument. Now I don't know your reasons for supporting the Greens, but I'll tell you that a lot of people's, like, I've seen some reasons for supporting the Greens out there, and some of them are pretty bad. And one of the things that I see a lot is talking about how Rhaenyra's fucking Kristen Cole and having her affair with Harwin that was her fault. She didn't do what she was supposed to do. She was acting stupid, and her fate is all the chickens are coming home to roost for her. Meanwhile, in the same breath, they'll talk about Kristen Cole somehow being justified in the murder of Joffrey Lonmouth, and how that was expected, and Kingsguard can just do that. And it's these weird things, right? Like where Rhaenyra having like sexual agency of fucking who she wants and like trying to live a happy life, but when the system forced her to marry a gay guy, it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. Meanwhile, Kristen Cole being a fucking murderer is a murderer no matter what. He's a murderer. Like, there's no way you should be justifying Kristen Cole getting off. And and I don't think those things are the things to criticize Rhaenyra for. I don't think her affair with Harwin's strong. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's a slight like occupational like power imbalance with regards to her fucking Kristen Cole, but I certainly don't think there was anything wrong with her relationship with Harwin Strong. And so I think it's funny when I hear people justify like the Greens and they talk about those things as things that Rhaenyra has done bad. Now, if somebody were to say to me, Rhaenyra conspired to kill a person so that Laenor could abandon his children, I'd be like, no, that's a good reason to hate the Blacks. Like, that's a fucking good reason to hate the Blacks. Or that Daemon is a murderer, because he is. That's a good reason to hate the Blacks. Absolutely. Or that Rhaenys murdered a bunch of people in the Dragon Pit. Yes, that's a very good reason to hate the Blacks. But it's really tough to justify Alicent at this point, considering she knows what Larry Strong is doing and has done. Kristen Cole, she knows what Kristen Cole did, and she's okay with that. Plus, I don't know who's poisoning Viserys, but it seems like somebody's poisoning Viserys. And then Aemond is a murderer at the end. So there's not much justification for being a Green supporter either. I can understand hating the Black. I can understand being nobody's supporters, but I don't know about being a Green supporter. I don't know what the reasoning for being a Green supporter would be. Like, what's the justification? Like, you start falling into stuff like the justification I've heard is like, well, that's Andal law. They should follow Andal law. You're like, Since when is like following an unjust law like moral? So I don't see much justification for supporting the Greens. Aegon's a rapist. Aemond is a murderer. Alicent is complicit in a lot of murder. It's Otto is a horrible, horrible schemer. It's bad stuff. It's bad stuff. Okay, switching gears. Do I ship Jaime and Brienne? What I ship is Brienne being with who she wants to be with. And so she is excited by roguish guys who are jerks. She likes those types of guys. So this is why she likes Sir Hyle. And I think I ship Sir Hyle a lot more than I ship Jaime. Sir Hyle is a good man, but he's also a dick. And he excites Brienne while being a good person. Meanwhile, Jaime excites Brienne while being a bad person. Like Jaime is still trying to be better. He's trying. And maybe if we get a little more redemption on his redemption arc, and he does a little more to make up for the fact that he threw a little boy out a window, that maybe we can forgive him for paralyzing a little boy. But before that, I just see Sir Hyle as being just a much better match for Brienne. Like Sir Hyle likes her. Like Sir Hyle legitimately likes Brienne. And Brienne legitimately likes Sir Hyle. So maybe I would ship Jaime and Brienne. Like, I mean, if there were no Sir Hyle, but Sir Hyle exists. So I guess in the show there's no Sir Hyle. So what you gonna do? But isn't Sir Hyle such a better shipping? Now I've got to look this up. Where's the Sir Hyle Brienne art? I want to see that. Where's all the romantic? I guess there's some. There's some. Okay. I'll grant that. But there seems to be a lot more Jaime and Brienne fan art of them getting together than Sir Hyle. But yeah, I don't necessarily lean black. I think the blacks are horrible at this point. But I wish they made Kristen Cole more religious post Rhaenyra, inspired by priest Monsignor Claude Frollo de Hunchback Notre Dame. Also, changes to Helaena will make her madness interesting. The one thing I'll say about Helaena is that we live in this world where Targaryens have prophetic dreams. Okay, they know about Daenerys the Dreamer. They all know about this. They all know about this character, right? And Viserys knows about prophetic dreams, and Alicent knows about prophetic dreams, and everybody's just walking around Helaena, doop de doop de doop. She's an idiot. Not a single person is do you think what she says means anything? Oh really? Family of prophecy receivers. Not a single person. I think it would be almost funnier had she been nuts and she was saying random shit and everyone was taking her seriously, being like, oh my God, Helaena said like, 3 dogs come at midnight. And it meant nothing because she was a freaking idiot. Like, I think that would be really funny. That everyone like thinks that she's saying prophecy and she's saying nothing because she's an idiot. But they've gone the other way, that she's saying legitimate prophecy, and they live in this world where prophecy exists and no one thinks anything of it. Like, dirt. She's just saying stuff like like even Viserys, like, is Viserys that blind? Like, he doesn't notice? Like, he's so sexist and hung up on like anyway, but really, Kristen called more religious post Rhaenyra. They had one line, of him being like, all people are in the name of the mother or stuff. But you're right that I think that it would have been interesting in this sort of like, so in Catholic Latin America Catholic tradition, and in movies and stuff, and in cinema, you get a lot of weird sexualizations of Mother Mary, stuff that make like Protestants and Americans like really uncomfortable. They're like, why are you sexualizing Mother Mary? But that stuff totally exists in Latin America. And so I think it might have been interesting to have like Alicent be his Mother Mary figure and him have this weird like sexual attraction to his like mother savior kind of situation. I think that might have worked. But again, we just didn't have time. Like, there should have been some sort of change, like him finding God, him praying more, like just a few scenes of him like doing that would have gone a long way, rather than just one throwaway line, which we're not sure if he said that because he's like somewhat a father to Aemond, or if he actually believes it or tries to believe it. Do you think Sarah Snow and Jace in the show? Oh yeah. I think definitely. I think any chance to put in more romance and sex, they're going to take it. They are going to take whatever chance they have to put in boobs. We just didn't get, considering how much violence they put, and it's Game of Thrones, like we didn't get enough. We didn't get the quota, right? We got an orgy scene, we got a sex scene with Rhaenyra and Kristen. But they really could have gone. We got a sex scene between Daemon and Mysaria, but they could have really gone more. I definitely think they're going to try to have some more romance and more sex. Absolutely, they're going to have that. And it won't even be ambiguous. It won't be like maybe Jason. No, they're doing something. But the what's the Jace actor age? I think he's only like 18 right now. So. But I think he's I think I looked it up before, and he was Leo Hart. No, that's not him. Is he? I came up with like some 73-year-old actor. He's portrayed by Harry Collette, and Leo Hart is the child. Harry Collette is born January 2004, so he is 18 years old. So I guess they plan this right so they can have him be in sex scenes now. I mean, I guess Miley Alcock was older though. She was like early 20s. I feel like Fire and Blood is a story ill-suited to having a protagonist. I don't think we were ever meant to identify with these characters beyond as historical figures. I think this is going to be the ending of a lot of hate. I think that we're already seeing that. I pay attention to the mainstream like article criticisms, and most of the articles do say, "I don't have anyone to root for. I don't have anyone to root for." As much as they tried to make Rhaenyra the hero, I think they really messed up with the planning of Laenor's death. I think a lot of people were not fooled by that. Like, she murdered somebody. Um, if they didn't have the Laenor death, everyone could still be rooting for Rhaenyra at this point, but the Laenor fake out. But we know what's going to happen in the future if you've read Fire and Blood. So I I think what they're kind of all missing the thematic point. The thematic point of the show is power corrupts everybody and the system is bad, right? Like, um by having this like House Stark, I'm House Lannister, you kind of miss the point of the whole thing. I think Game of Thrones missed the mark by like making Arya into a hero. Like, Arya is a horrible human being. She was irredeemable, and they made her into this hero. Uh, Jon Snow was flawed, but he was at least redeemable. But and I suppose in the end, like, all the good characters survived, right? It was Sam, and it was Brienne, and it was Davos, right? And they were all the surviving people with Bran. It was supposed to be all the good people surviving at the end or something. Like, you were supposed to be happy that Bran sits the throne, even though that kind of misses the point too, because like the whole point is that like the system sucks. Yes, he's an electable king, but you know it's more than that. It's you got to get these tyrants out of there, right? But this story is definitely going to end with another king on the throne, the system continuing, uh, uh, just it being a bloodbath with no one to like. Um, because the point of the story is the system sucks, not you shouldn't be rooting for people. Um, so I kind of think that if they needed characters to root for, and House of the Dragon is interesting versus Game of Thrones because there are no good characters and there are no completely evil characters, right? Like, every character, there's no Joffrey Ramses where, I mean, maybe Laurie Strong, but like, besides Laurie Strong, there's no character that's absolutely 100% evil. But there's no character that's good. While Game of Thrones definitely has both. So I think it's interesting to have all great characters. I don't know if it's going to work. I think maybe had they had Mushroom and Septon Eustace as characters that we could follow and be at least the good observers, it might have been helpful. I mean, I suppose, we feel Luke and Jace seem like are good characters at this point. I guess that, they keep producing new good characters to root for. I mean, the only good character left, right, is Jace and Helaena at this point. Everybody else kind of sucks. Um, Eric and Arik, maybe, stuff like that. But yeah, I think we're gonna see if they can stick the landing, but it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. Who isn't a murderer? Jace. Jace is not a murderer. Helena is not a murderer. You are not a murderer. You are. Thoughts on Sam Harris? Um, Admittedly, I don't know that much about Sam Harris. Um, I I want to say that like he's. I've had other people like talk about him briefly, but I don't really know his opinions too much in order for me to make um a good opinion. Uh he I think I did read something about like him trying to come up with his own like moral system philosophically, but you just can't do it. Like, but I don't. To be honest, I just don't. I don't. I don't know enough about him to have a good opinion one way or the other. But I'll have to look into it more. I mean, he's a name that everybody keeps bringing up, but I honestly like have just not like paid attention to his beliefs to know exactly what he's into. Um, I care about more about characters and story and not about their moral standings, and this is why I tend to lean more towards the Greens, Lannisters, etc. book and show. Um, like if they, yeah, I mean, I can see that if they're like layered, like even if they have problems, they're layered problems. Like, you know, Cersei is nuts and crazy, but there's many layers to that nuts and crazy, right? Like, um, so I would I would say that's an interesting aspect. But you know, you could say that they're people talk about this a lot, like what characters are fun to hate, or like I love watching them even though they're horrible. I think the people that like are into horror movies, for example, that are into um, Freddy Krueger. It's not like they like Freddy Krueger as a character morally, like he's a horrible human being, but they find him fascinating to watch. So um, that kind of interesting thing. What's your opinion of a Jon and Sansa political marriage? That's it's an interesting kind of thing. Is Sansa is just an offshoot of George's original plan for Arya, right? He wanted to have his original plan was that there was this Arya, and Arya and Jon were secretly in love, but thought that they were their love would be improper because they are half siblings. But if later on they find out that they're cousins, that's perfectly fine. But Tyrion also falls in love with Arya, and so there's going to be this like tension between them. Um, and then later on, George decided to split Arya into two characters, and he toned back, he scaled back the romances. Um, Tyrion does fall in love with Sansa, but it's kind of a blip in his story. Jon has some maybe creepy moments with Arya at the beginning that you could read that way once you find out, like, but or they could just be proper sibling love, like read another way. Um, uh, uh, but we don't ever really think about Jon and Sansa as characters. Like they're after the split, there was kind of a divorce, right? Like Jon and Arya, Tyrion and Sansa. Tyrion's not in love with Arya. Jon is not in love with Sansa. Like you've got this full split. Now, could Jon and Sansa like have a political marriage? Um, like later on, I mean, it's possible, but it also kind of like ruins the eventual um, idea that if Winterfell's been ruled by nothing but men for so long, and this idea that a woman needs to rule it finally, there needs to be a change. If she's only ruling through Jon Snow or Jon Snow doing it together, it kind of takes away from that. Um, so it's I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about it more like story wise. Like I wouldn't necessarily like it. Does it make sense politically? I mean, her. I guess if you're trying to pull in like the sexist Northerners, but at the same time, like she's got the legitimacy and he's got the dick kind of thing. I guess it makes sense in that sense. Do we know how Cannibal Sheepstealer and Grey Ghost hatched? Does your theory, which I like, about human role in hatching dragons include wild ones? It would. It would. We don't know much about. So we know almost nothing about Cannibal. So Cannibal just kind of appears, and everyone's like, we don't know how old he is. Like he could be. He, I think there might have even been a story about him being there before um, Daenerys the Dreamer arrives, but he's the one that we know very little about. I think Sheep Stealer is hatched early on in Jaehaerys's reign. Um, the let's see, Cannibal. Yeah, so some small folk claim that Cannibal lived on the island before even the Targaryens arrived. So, and is from a completely different lineage of dragons all together, which might explain why he's antagonistic to Targaryen dragons. Um, the so Sheep Stealer, Grey Ghost is later on because I think he's a smaller dragon, but Sheep Stealer is supposed to be pretty old, like born early in Jaehaerys. But my theory that I think I'm coming on um, is that yeah, it is probably something to do with pregnant women, perhaps even maybe even miscarriages. Probably some sort of external pheromone is emitted or something that like helps hatch the dragons. I think that's probably where I'm going with it, but it would just be like, well, perhaps I have to check to see if Sheep Stealer lines up with one of Alisane's like miscarriages. The problem with Cannibal, we don't know when he's born, so anything could have happened with Cannibal. And the same with Grey Ghost, like maybe he lines up with one of Emma Aaron's miscarriages or something, pregnancy or miscarriage. But we have to check the timing on a lot of these things. Do, 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 do. And finally getting to my end here. Okay. One theme is rumors make reality. Most don't care. A guard was killed. With Laenor. Who would you like to do a proper novelization of season one? Oh, I mean, besides George R. R. Martin, uh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, anybody could work. I mean, some people say like just get Brandon Sanderson writes everything so fast, maybe he could do it. But I mean, obviously, like it doesn't if it doesn't have George R. R. Martin's like feel to it. Like only George R. R. Martin can really do George R. R. Martin. Um, I mean, unless you want to go with like his proteges like James James Corey or whatever, who kind of feel like George R. R. Martin somewhat. But um, I think some people watched the situation with Laenor and didn't think anything of it because they missed the fact that somebody was murdered or something. I don't know. Um, I think it was something like that. But uh, I think if you once you kind of point out to people, no, she conspired to murder somebody, they'd be like, oh, right, that's bad. I think a modern viewer, it's hard to. I mean, she just murdered a poor guy. It's just weird, 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 weird. Somebody put update on Aereo 2. I was joking, being like 75% done, 75% done. Um, but no, I haven't had time to work on it too much. But I've worked on it some. Um, but it's coming along. I'll work on it more this week, and maybe it'll be in a better situation. Um, oh, you argue in time traveling Bran that free fall is a catalyst for powers. Do you think that could have been ancient purpose of the Moon Door, perhaps aiding errands and mounting their big birds? Oh, interesting. Um, the That's an interesting idea. The I don't know if George really thought about it other than the fact that like falling and flying and things like this and bringing those ideas up. But yeah, this idea that falling, you're weightless, have more sensory deprivation, that kind of stuff. All right. Good morning from Israel. Best show on liquid television was the Max. I liked the Max a lot. I really hated the other one, the Head. Um, the Max is kind of like if you guys have played um, the Link to the Past, the Legend of Zelda game, where they like he like flashes to an alternate world and then goes around. It's kind of like the setting, but this homeless guy like thinks he's like flashing to this other world called the Outback, which is kind of funny. But I like the Max. I liked it a lot actually. Um, Hoping they make Daron and his uncle's relationship like Aegon and John Connington. Only big moment he has is avenging his nephew. Need more. Definitely. I mean, all these characters just needed more, right? Like it's really too bad that they that people are spread really thin. I mean, I think the choices they made for the amount for the amount of time that they covered, I think the choices they made were right. Like decrease Daron's role, decrease Joffrey Valarian's role. Um, you know, where they could, they decreased roles, but that's about all you can do at some point. At some point, like these characters do something major in the story, and they seem almost bound to follow the story a little or follow the source material almost to a fault at certain points, and then not at other points. But yeah, I think I don't know if there'll be enough time. I don't know if there'll be enough time. I somehow feel like there's not going to be enough time for Daron. That he's just going to be reintroduced and promptly killed. I mean, we kind of think about poor Luke. Like, how much did we really know about Luke? He got one little scene where he talks to Corlys, and then he gets like a scene where he cries to his mom at the beginning of the episode before he's promptly killed. They do a lot of this like let's introduce ourselves to somebody before they needed to die. Like Joffrey Lonmouth, So um uh also the story of Sir Rickard Thorne and Maelor could be a standalone, like the Hateful Eight ending. And Daron showing up. The Now Maelor, I'm remembering how. Remember Maelor? Oh yeah, that's right. So Laris smuggles Maelor and his sister to safety, and then charges Rickard Thorne of the Kingsguard to bring Maelor to Old Town. But at Bitterbridge, Rickard is brought down by a mob, and uh, the mob crushes Maelor to death. And um, so it's a sad story. Sad story. Did we even see Maelor? Is Maelor? I guess in the blood drips you see three going from Aegon to Aegon and Helaena. So I guess Maelor exists, even though I don't know if I've seen him in a scene. Maybe I missed him. Um, they should have gotten Lena's body out of the water and pretended it to be Laenor. I think that they could have just like rather than him choking the dude, just like have a scene where Damon in a cloak is handing money to a guy who's got a pile of bodies, like or a guy who's at like a hospital with a bunch of like sick dudes lying around, and him just going chink, and then he's got a dead body. Like that's it. Like it could have been a lot easier than murdering a guy, and it would have kept Rhaenyra pure, at this point. Um, so it's too bad. Too bad that they're just, oh, that's too messy. Let's just the sets and everything. Let's just have him like kill a random dude and then use his body. Um, um, Yeah, we didn't see Maelor, but he's only supposed to be two or three. Right. I thought maybe they'd show a scene of, Helaena shaking a baby or something. Um, yeah. Da, da, da. Would you have preferred to see Blood and Cheese this season? No, I think that um, if I'm going to cram it into two seasons, I would have the fight over Storm's End be the ending and the climax of things. Like why spew why ruin both of my like big shock moments in the same episode. I think that there was a natural ending, and we've been talking about this for a while, but I think the fight over Storm's End was just kind of a natural ending if you were gonna have the start of the um the start of the war. A guy who's got a pile of bodies. Yeah, they're called coroners. Like they got piles of bodies. Like people got piles of bodies. Or just show them going to a graveyard and digging up a body. Like easy peasy. Like, paying a coroner. Like body like people die every day. People die every day. Believe it or not, 2% of society dies every year. There's a lot. There's a whole show called The Leftovers where 2% of society disappears. And that's the metaphor of the show. Like, oh my gosh, like 2% of society just disappeared. Well, yeah, 2% of society dies every year. Like, well, I mean, round it up, But um uh yeah, I'm surprised fans care about the servant when Jaime killed his cousin. Yeah, it's true. Show Jamie is dreadful. I think Show Jamie is fairly irredeemable after killing his cousin, and he never really did anything that wonderfully selfless at that point. So, um, I mean, you can always argue that like, okay, the pushing Bran out the window was a self defense thing. Like, um, his whole life is threatened at that point. But there was just the killing of his cousin is just so stupid. Like it's just there's no coming back from that. But you're right that people didn't remember it, and they still were shipping Jaime and Brienne, and were like, yeah, when Jaime and Brienne finally fucked, and then um, and they totally forgot about his cousin. I mean, props to the show. Like when Jamie like listed his crimes, he always did list the cousin. So I at least like appreciate that they didn't forget about him in the show, even if the fans forgot about him. Um, Body needs to be fresh because of rigor mortis. But rigor mortis kicks in really fast, right? Um, I want to say so. Rigor mortis appears between 1 and 6 hours, average of 2 to 4 hours. Huh. Hmm. That they would like find the body in the fire and the rigor mortis would be there. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would have felt better then if it's really about the rigor mortis, like that. They go to a jail or something and find some criminal or something to But um, than some random poor guard. At least like find somebody that's like evil and guilty of something, or like, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't sit with me well that they've killed an innocent man. Preston's latest thing: people die every day. Yeah, I know. Or like, I don't know, somebody that was sick in the hospital or something that was gonna die anyway, and they're like, this one's on his way out. Take him. Would have been a little better. It would have been infinitely better than killing a healthy, young, innocent man. Um, if Laris's blood, is it because um, he secretly loved and protected his two nephews, Jace's coleslaw, and participates out of revenge? Um, I think if I mean, trying to remember because he, let's see. That's the other thing is so when we're talking about like like the death of Maelor and like Laurie smuggling him out and then passing him off to somebody who gets him killed. It's almost like Loris wanted that child to die too, you know. So there's other things that makes me think that Loris was like also anti-green. Um, but he definitely did. We're definitely supposed to think that Loris did some anti-Daemon stuff in the beginning. Um, so he's at least, if not anti-black, anti-Daemon. So I think that what was he trying to actually like? But then Daemon doesn't have any blood in sort of Jace or Luke. If he thinks they're strongs, does he actually want to like have them succeed? I have to go back on all the things that Laris does. Like, does he actually kill his family? Is he that much anti? Is he that much anti strong, or does he switch to becoming a black supporter because he realizes that Jace, Luke, and Joffrey are strongs, or thinks that Jace, Luke, and Joffrey are strongs? Um, yeah, I mean, George obviously wanted it all to be ambiguous so that we could have these debates, but uh, um, um, Preston, why do you think that free fall in atmosphere is effectively sensory deprivation? Skydiving isn't exactly relaxing. Skydiving isn't relaxing if you have your eyes open, but it's legitimate. It's a legitimate feeling of weightlessness. Now, granted, I've never skydived. I've bungee jumped, but like it's the legitimate feeling of weightlessness um, in the process. Um, you don't really feel the atmosphere or think about the atmosphere too much. Um, Even though I do kind of remember the wind going into my eyes and tears in my eyes, but I still felt weightless. Um, but again, this isn't necessarily like truth versus like what George R. R. Martin kind of thinks, right? Like, um, he talks about falling all the time, falling and floating as being kind of the same things, and so it's not necessarily what truth is. It's what George R. R. Martin kind of thinks. So, I mean, it also turns out that like sensory deprivation doesn't actually do very much. So, um, do you ever think? Do you think they would ever do a big reveal with so many shows planned? Would a Dream Center Hive Mind Tree post-apocalyptic reveal be too much? Oh, that'd be far too much. That'd be far too much. They would not do that sort of thing. That sort of stuff. If even George were planning on doing a reveal like that, which he would, I don't think George would ever do a reveal like that. Um, so in the daylight, because he's in ambiguity, he would do it. If he did do something like that, it'd be near the end of the show, near the end of the book series. All right, I'm gonna do just a couple more, and then I've got to get going because I've been on for a while here, and my voice is gone. Um, um, I feel like the show failed to make conflict nuance. The Greens just look like the villains, and no one cares about evils of Rhaenyra and Rhaenys. I think they're legitimately trying to repair Alicent. I think like we the viewer are supposed to be like, oh, what a great mother, she cares about her son. I think they're supposed to think like, oh, Alicent is so great, she's trying to repair her friendship with Rhaenyra. Like, I think we're legitimately supposed to think like um Alicent is a redeemable character. There's been a lot of time humanizing Alicent. um so it's there's that. But I think, hmm like, is there more time spent on like Rhaenyra? Never, like, Rhaenyra was always kind of good except for the murder. So like there's no repair needed for Rhaenyra. So that might be a situation where people are like tend to be more black oriented than green oriented. But but it is true that when Rhaenys is looking at that pantheon of greens, um, they don't look great. Like you got Laris and Otto and Aegon, um, all up there, and you're like, oh god, what a roll of maggots, So um, I admit, like looking at the blacks, yes, uh, Damon is horrible, but Jason, Luke, and Joffrey are so pure, that they kind of make up for everything. And Rhaenyra, has the big mistake, but I don't think the showrunners understand that it was a mistake or something. But but yes. Um, let's see here. We should talk politics someday. Reddit gets a bit boring. Yeah, we haven't had time, we haven't done politics in a long time, except except for the murder, right? But the show, like, yeah, except Helaena. Helena's fine, and at the time, Aemond hadn't done anything too bad, so um, what's he gonna do? He of course becomes a murderer the next episode. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Rhaenyra didn't lie in front of the heart tree. She just didn't tell the full story. No, she lied in front of the heart tree. I understand that the actors thought that she just didn't tell the full story, but she definitely lied in front of the heart tree. Um, uh, she says that like Damon got drunk and passed out, and so she left, and that didn't happen. Damon did not get drunk and pass out and leave her alone. Like that didn't happen. So, um, uh, um, small folk aren't real. Yeah, sometimes you feel like the show is like that. Um, that's the truth. The show lacks relatable characters. Being gray is not the same as everyone being straight up evil. It is true. And when I talk about like how I think Theon is a very relatable character, while being gray, like while Jaime is not really very much of a relatable character, um, while being gray, right? Like none of us imagine ourselves being in love with our sister and like having pushed a little boy out of a window and thinking you're the greatest sword fighter in the world. But we kind of all relate to Theon, like being insecure and like stuff like and thinking you're the best but not really being the best, but also being super insecure. Like you know Theon is much more relatable being a gray character than say Jaime, who is just like does very good and very evil things at once. So um, yeah, she also says that Damon never touched her, which is ridiculous, ridiculous. Um, oh, she did not lie on her mother's name though. That might be true. That she does the two things. She lies on her mother's name. It may be that when um, Millie Alcock was because inside the episode says that Rhaenyra doesn't lie. She may be referring just to the what she lies on her mother's name or what she speaks on her mother's name with. So, um, I lack imagination, Preston. Um, no one's ever told me that. I'll tell you that. No one has ever told me that I've lacked imagination. Some people say I have far too much imagination. I mean, I think you're referring specifically to the Jaime thing, but like, I don't know. Um, I just do think that's funny. I understand what you're saying because it's referring to the Jaime thing, but you know. um, well, man, like the chat got so political. But it's like a long political chain where I'm like, what were they talking about? Um, let's do one more thing and then I gotta get going. But thank you for everybody. Um, oh, I think Aegon the Second being bad to kids is a problem for season 4 when he's not going to kill or hurt Aegon the Younger because he's a child. It's an interesting point. Um, but again, like he he didn't. We don't know why he's attending those child fights. Like he could be doing those child fights because he wants to, you know, because it's not like he's making the kids fight. Like one can argue that okay, if he's betting on them, that maybe he's adding to the industry or something. But you know, those child fights would go on if Aegon wasn't there or not. You know, so he may be like going to the child fights to like test his own morality, see what shocks him. He knows how horrible it is, and so he wants to see how horrible it is because he just um, it almost reminds me a little bit of the motivation of the Man in Black in Westworld. Like he wants to get into the dark side of himself to like see who he is. Like one could play it like that. That like he is looking to see what he is like, and then when he's actually faced with um, an actual child and like harming a child himself, that he thinks of all of those kids in those fights and can't bring himself to do it and stuff like that. I mean, there's ways to make it work, um, but I do think you're right that they made it a harder job. Like they made it hard. Like Aegon is an interesting character in that he thinks he's evil and he thinks he's not cut out for being a king. And that's one of my favorite aspects of episode 7, which are episode eight. No, episode 9. I'm sorry. Fuck. My favorite aspects of episode 9 was the fact that like it's an exploration of Aegon as a character, and he surprises us on who he is, and he's not who we expected. And then um and then that ending happens that kind of like takes away from the whole thing. But I think there's a way to make it work. But I do agree that uh they made it hard. Anyway, but yeah, I guess on my final thing, implications of Laenor being alive, Dragon's kind of a second rider. There was a weird thing with Daemon, like looking into the eyes of Vermithor and like feeling a bond with a second dragon. So maybe they're just like establishing that people can bond with more than one dragons at once or something. But you know, so we'll see. But I think that might be it. But thank you everyone for sticking with me. Um, and we'll see what we talk about next week. I mean, probably still more House of the Dragon, Ice and Fire, politics, things like that. But um, yeah, we'll see what guests I can get on too. But oh, I just realized why Carmine couldn't get on. I accidentally switched the interview off button. I guess that'll be for next time. All right, guys. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks a bunch. Bye.